The slap sounded like a glass struck with a fork, a bright, humiliating ping that made the chandeliers tremble. Gardenia breath. A crescent of red across my cheek. My mother's hand still raised, as if it could snatch my penthouse out of the skyline with the same motion. "Hand over the keys," she hissed. "It's your sister's wedding day." "We are moving in tonight." Champagne paused mid-air. The string quartet wobbled in canon in D. Somewhere, a fork clinked and gave up on staying on a plate. My father didn't look at me. His jaw ticked like a metronome with hurt feelings. My sister Camille stood in a froth of silk near the terrace doors, eyes enormous, expression pleading in that oldest of languages. "Not today, please." I put my fingers to my cheek and felt heat rise under skin I'd powdered carefully that afternoon. I could have raised my voice. I chose something sharper. "Mom," I said, keeping my tone flat enough to skate on. "We've discussed this." "We did not discuss," she said. "We announced. Family lives together. You have the space. Your grandmother would want us there." Her mouth tilted toward the high windows and the slice of blue beyond them. "Unless you think you own that view." "I do think it's beautiful," I said. "It's why you booked this hotel, because from the terrace you can stare at my building." Her lips thinned. She put the back of her hand to her chest, like she was protecting some small, dear thing. Her feelings, perhaps, or the idea that the world will always obey her. "Stop being dramatic and give me the keys." I checked the time on my phone. 3:12 p.m. Ceremony at 4, reception at 6. Dessert around 7, which was when I had planned to read the thing she'd never read in her life. A clause. "I'll explain at dessert," I said softly. "Don't pack." "You're making a scene," my father muttered. "She's making the scene," I said, and glanced at Camille. "Say the word and I leave, Cam. But they don't get my home." Her throat moved. "Can we talk later?" "We will," I promised. 7 o'clock. Dessert. I left the table, feeling stares cling and drop as I crossed the ballroom. In the cool of the photo corridor, with its frames of strangers' vows, I called Rachel. "Please tell me you have the envelope," Rachel said without hello, the way women who pay attention greet disaster. "It's in my clutch," I said. "They say they hired movers for 9. Then let them walk themselves to the cliff," she said calmly. "You bring the guardrail at 7. I slid the phone away. I looked at my reflection in a gilt mirror. Lipstick intact, hair smoothed into place, eyes steady. I touched the envelope through the silk lining of my clutch and breathed. In 2 hours, I would say out loud what my grandmother wrote down for me, because she knew a day like this would come. Start at the beginning, if only so you understand why I treated paper like a sword. Grandma didn't leave me the penthouse with a wave and a kiss. She left it the way prudent women do, with filings. On March 14th last year, at 10:41 a.m., she signed an amendment to the Tran Family Irrevocable Trust and marched it across to the county recorder. Instrument number 2023-118947. The amendment moved title for Unit PH-A at 1150 Astor from the Trust's Master Holding Company into a single-member LLC, Blue Bowl LLC. Blue Bowl because my grandmother believed every home should have one place to put small things you don't want to lose. Sole member, the trust, with me as the designated beneficiary for that asset. The one-sentence reason she gave my parents when they asked her why: she remembers to open windows. That was all. Not that I was the oldest or the most dutiful, just that I remembered to open windows. She had no patience for rooms that refused fresh air. Mildew kills more marriages than infidelity, she'd say, which tells you something about where I come from. Amendments, deeds, conformed copies, tax stamps, none of those are romantic. But they are the only love letters a building will read. And tucked under the bland paragraphs and the signature in her tolerant, looping hand was a clause she insisted on, which Rachel had drafted and my grandmother had underlined twice with a fountain pen. 8.3. 8.3. Any attempt by non-beneficiaries, including family, to coerce, occupy, or claim rights to the property without the written consent of the beneficiary shall constitute breach of the trust's no contest provision, triggering immediate forfeiture of the violator's contingent interests. I did not think of 8.3 when my mother asked to borrow the guest room for one weekend and then left her winter coats hanging for 3 months. I thought of it the first time I came home to find the borrowed guest room rearranged, a new flat screen installed, and my father's razor on the edge of my sink because the light is better here. They had a key because my father had fed my cat one weekend when I had the flu. I changed the locks after that. The locksmith smelled like coffee and latex gloves and looked at me with the kind of sympathy men reserve for women who are trying to parent their parents. Families, he said in neutral tone. Doors, I said back. My parents found it ludicrous that I would lock a door against them. You were a baby in our arms, my mother would say, holding up a hand as if the memory had weight she could heft. Now you lock us out? I lock my door, I'd say, because nouns matter. My door. Then Camille got engaged, and the logistics crescendoed around a color palette. They booked the hotel with the view of my building because, my mother admitted this with a smile, it felt like we owned the skyline that way. 2 days before the wedding, my mother texted me a bullet list titled Move-In Essentials. It named the master bedroom, my office, the small guest room, the storage cage, 2 parking spaces, key handoff Friday. I sent back 6 typed words. We will discuss after the reception. She read it as, yes, keys at the reception. The ceremony was a watercolor. The officiant's voice quavered only once. Ethan squeezed Camille's fingers and breathed her back into the room. The string quartet found its footing again. The sun struck the stone just right. I stood behind Camille in a dress that technically upstaged no one, and fixed the hem while I practiced saying a sentence calmly in my head. Clause 8.3. It tastes like the clean edge of a note card when you say it right. At cocktail hour, Dad cornered me at the raw bar. Oyster shells winked like rich people's jokes. He put his palm on the chair back and leaned in, as if intimacy could stun me. Your grandmother would be ashamed, he said. Family. Lives together, I finished for him. Dad, wealthy families sign things. Do you want to hear what she signed? His eyes flickered, not toward curiosity, but toward calculation. "Don't get legal with me." "It's already legal," I said. "And recorded." My mother joined us, taller by the inch anger gives women who have never had to argue, and therefore are insulted by the need. "The movers are set for 9, she said. "They'll take the master, your office, and the small guest room." "You're assuming they'll find themselves admitted," I said. "Do they have keys?" A flash of teeth. "Your father made copies when he fed the cat last month." I looked at him. He looked at the oyster knife like it might show him the future. "It's family," he said. "It's burglary," I said, "if we're counting nouns." Ethan, still a decent man with an even more decent tie, drifted over, worry knitting his forehead. "Everything okay?" "Perfect," my mother said. "We're just working out logistics for tonight." "Tonight?" he echoed. "Tonight's logistics are very clear," I said, touching the flap of Rachel's envelope like a rosary. "And printed." "Printed?" Dad's laugh was a scrape. "I'll read it at 7, I said. He looked offended that I didn't offer him adjectives to fight. Between the main course and dessert, people chose sides the way relatives do when gossip presents itself as service. My aunt, who believes information is a savings account she alone should control, sidled up and tilted her head. A good daughter thinks of her parents' needs at their age. A good parent doesn't slap her daughter at a wedding, I said without heat. The tilt vanished. Ethan's mother, Lydia, appeared at my elbow with immaculate political instincts and the softest, kindest eyes. "Do you need a room key?" she asked, low. We booked a separate suite for the couple. 2 beds, just in case anyone's plan involves yours. "I'm okay," I said. "Thank you." At 6:42, Camille slipped into the bridal room, cheeks pink, hands twisting the edge of her veil in minor distress. "Mom says you're being dramatic." "I'm being specific," I said. "Do you want them to move into my home tonight?" "I want tonight to be beautiful." "Then no boxes move," I said. She sank onto a chaise and put her head on my shoulder. I hate when she does this. I know. We shared a childhood, after all. An affectionate mother on the good days, a steamroller on the bad. A woman who thought family was a skeleton key. "You're not going to humiliate them, are you?" Camille asked. "I'm going to protect my front door," I said, "with numbers and nouns." She let out a breath that smelled like cake and fear. Okay. At 6:58, we took our seats. The chandeliers quit pretending to tremble. The cake waited, like a white lie. I set Rachel's envelope on the table where my mother could see it and glanced up. Her eyes narrowed at the sight, like a cat watching a laser pointer. "Is that necessary?" she asked. "It's helpful," I said. "Like a map." "For who?" "For anyone who thinks keys are suggestions." The band leader tapped the mic. "Before we continue with the set, the maid of honor has a few words." Polite applause rose and fell. I stood, lifted the mic, and felt the room tip toward me. 2 minutes, I promised, and then we dance. "My sister," I began, keeping my voice warm, because truth goes down better when you don't serve it with ice, "loves real. She loves people who say what they mean and keep their hands off other people's things. Laughter, soft, appreciative, ran through the room like a hand smoothing a satin ribbon. In that spirit, I continued, I need to say something tonight that will make tomorrow easier. I slid the papers out of the envelope, the certified copy of the trust amendment, the conformed copy of the deed, a letter on Rachel Thornton, Esquire, letterhead. No theatrics, just the weight of paper that has been read by a public clerk and stamped as a citizen of the county. On March 14th, 2023, at 10:41 a.m., my grandmother amended the Tran family irrevocable trust, I said. The amendment, instrument 2023-118947, moved title of the Penthouse at 1150 Astor into Blue Bull LLC, sole member, the trust. I am the beneficiary for that asset. I let the numbers sit. Rooms understand dates and an instrument number in a way they do not understand moral claims. Under that amendment, I said, Clause 8.3 states, any attempt by non-beneficiaries, including family, to coerce, occupy, or claim rights to said property without the written consent of the beneficiary shall constitute breach of the no contest provision. Such breach triggers immediate disinheritance of the violating party's contingent interests. The hush that followed tasted like relief, not because people love disinheritance, because they love a line. And because we love receipts, I added. I brought conformed copies of the deed transfer, proof of taxes paid, HOA current, and a letter addressed to any locksmiths, movers, or doormen who are approached tonight with unauthorized keys. I looked at my parents when I said unauthorized, and then back at the page. To whom it may concern, I read. You are on notice that any attempted entry into the premises at 1150 Astor, Unit PHA, without the beneficiary's written consent, will be treated as trespass and reported to the building, the HOA, and the police. Attached, please find photographs of lock cylinders as of March 1st and the authorization list on file with the concierge. I folded the letter and slid it back into the envelope. Now that we've said the quiet legal part out loud, I said lightly, may I propose a better tonight? Let's dance. Applause this time had a point of view. The band surged in, grateful to give the room a different shape. Lydia raised her glass at me in acknowledgement, and because she is a woman who knows when a baton has been passed. My mother did not clap. You would do this to your parents? She said, through the cafeteria smile she uses when she intends to starve you and insist she fed you. I would do this for my front door, I said, and for my sister's wedding. Paper, my father said, managing to sound like a slur. Always paper. Paper is how adults love boundaries, I said, and handed him a clean copy of 8.3. He didn't take it.
They regrouped. It's what they do. The phrases changed. You know, we only want to be close to family, my mother said to anyone who would listen, voice trembling a little, the way she trembles when a salesperson refuses to give her the discount she believes she deserves. She's always been difficult. I didn't chase them. You do not win a battle of adjectives with people who think they own them. I chose logistics. 7:14 p.m., I texted Miguel, the night concierge at my building. Heads up. If anyone asks you to accept a key tonight, they are not authorized. Please refer to the letter I left at noon. Miguel, plus a photo of the letter propped next to his keyboard. 7:22 p.m., a text from an unknown number. We have a moving truck at 9 p.m. Kindly have elevator padded. I saved the number as Plan B, Mom. 7:37 p.m. Camille tugged my arm for the first dance. They moved across the floor in a terrible, wonderful attempt at grace. Two people trying to learn how to measure together. I stood near
the edge and watched my father slip his phone to my uncle. The nod they exchanged said, "I have not yet accepted that nouns beat stories." At 8:01 p.m., my mother returned with Pastor Kim, whose kindness had baptized half the babies in our family and married the other half, and whose only sin is to believe that unity is always just one prayer away. "Perhaps a prayer," she said, eyes bright with injury, "for unity." "I will always pray for unity," I said to Pastor Kim, "and for doors that close." He gave me the saddest, wisest smile and put a hand on my shoulder for the fraction of a second you can offer someone who must fight a battle you can't fight for them. "Boundaries are a kind of prayer," he said softly, and retreated before my mother could conscript him into her performance. By then my father's jaw ticked with a rhythm that suggested he wanted to smash something. "You and your papers." "Me and my quiet," I said. I had spent years arguing with feelings. Tonight, I would only read. The DJ announced the bouquet toss. My mother realized attention had wandered. She pulled a folded sheet from her bag and held it up like a trophy. "If paper is what you love," she said harshly, "I brought some too." "What is that?" I asked. "The family agreement we discussed," she said. "Everyone signs tonight. Keys follow." I unfolded it. A bulleted list. It used verbs like request and expect, as if they were synonyms. Master bedroom, office, small guest room. 2 parking spaces. Storage cage. Signatures, all family. "This is not an agreement," I said evenly. "It's a wish list." "You will sign." "I will not." "So ungrateful," she hissed. "Ungrateful is the word people use when they mean no," I said. 8 o'clock. Dessert. And a notary. At dessert, Lydia tapped her glass and, because I love her for it, asked for a few minutes of quiet for housekeeping, which make people laugh and therefore listen. "Marriages begin with boundaries," she said, "the way only a woman who has tolerated men publicly can. Some are about feelings. Some are about doors. Tonight, we honor both." I stood again. I did not apologize for standing again. "Earlier, I read Clause 8.3, I said. "If you missed it, don't worry. It isn't a threat. It's a promise. It protects me from being turned into a staircase." Laughter again. Gratitude this time. "I have one more note," I said. "This one went to the building's security, the HOA, and any vendors who might be asked to accept keys tonight." I read 2 short paragraphs, no adjectives, all nouns, and added, "I also brought a notary." Delilah, hair in a bun, stamp in her sensible bag, raised her pen. My mother's face did something I had never seen it do. Go blank. Blanks are terrifying in women like her. They are. A precipice. You planned this, she said. You booked a moving truck, I said. You have shamed us, my father said. I have prevented a crime, I said. Camille slid between us like silk. Can we please just cut the cake? She sounded like a child who had learned diplomacy by necessity. We will, I said. But first, Mom, Dad, please put your keys on the table. The room held its breath like a body awaiting anesthesia. They did not move. Of course they did not move. Lydia put a roll of hotel mints down between the plates like a mediator. Perhaps we can agree on something small, she said dryly. Like not turning a wedding into a lease negotiation. I agree, I said, which is why I brought paper. Your grandmother loved us more than documents, my mother said, contriving a tear at the corner of her eye. She loved open windows, I said, and she signed whatever it took to keep them open. Pastor Kim tried one more stitch. Love fulfills the law, he offered. And the law guards love, I said. Delilah arrived quietly, like a librarian at story hour. If anyone wishes to sign an acknowledgement that they are not authorized to enter 1150 Astor PHA without the beneficiary's written consent, she said. I have forms. My father stared. You expect us to sign a confession? It's not a confession, I said. It's clarity. Someone's cousin muttered, Can we not do legal at dessert? Which is just a way of saying, could you bleed somewhere else? I tried, I said kindly, but people packed boxes. At 8:27 p.m., my phone buzzed. Miguel. 2 men asked about padding the elevator at 9. Showed them the letter. They left. I lifted my phone just enough for my mother to see Miguel's message. Something in her shoulders sagged. The door is safe, I said. We can dance. You think you won, she said. There was no contest, I said. We cut cake. Sugar bought us 7 minutes of civil. The band played something that poured like warm tea. Then my father leaned close and delivered a line that will live forever in the snarkier corners of the family. You will regret choosing papers over parents. If you ever choose people over plans, I said, there's a chair at my table. His expression shifted a centimeter. My mother made a sound like grief played on a keyboard, and then swallowed it because grief doesn't get you a keycard. The city glittered. The terrace filled with guests who wanted photos with the skyline. Inside, I ate Camille's frosting because she doesn't like buttercream, and monitored the exits like a hostess who knows which relatives to keep off the rug. 9:03 p.m. A photo from Miguel. My parents, in my building's lobby. My mother's posture righteous. My father's jaw set. Handled, he captioned. 9:06 p.m. A second text. They presented a family agreement. I gave them water, called the HOA, referred them to your attorney. They left. 9:17 p.m. Rachel called. Sheriff's Department logged the concierge call, she said. If your parents try again tonight, there'll be a cruiser in the area. You probably won't need it. Thank you, I said. And Maya, she added. And in her voice was the rare thing. Gentleness. For a woman who has just done an adult thing no one taught her to do.
That was generous. You read without humiliating. I don't mind a little humiliation, I said wryly, but it's my sister's.
We hung up. Lydia appeared with an envelope. Inside, a photo of the skyline and, on the bottom, in her hand, "Thank you for keeping our day from becoming someone else's plan." At 9:31 p.m., my mother returned. The rage had drained out. A brittle regret had been poured in, not stirred. "You embarrassed us," she said finally. "You slapped me," I said, "if we're counting." She swallowed. "I got carried away." "This isn't about the slap," I said. "It's about the way you think love entitles you to a set of keys." "We raised you," she said. "I'm grateful," I said. "I'll be more grateful from my own bed." Pastor Kim reappeared with coffee and mercy. "One day," he murmured to my mother, "you'll be proud that your daughter chose truth without spectacle." "One day," my mother said, "she will be lonely." I didn't correct her. Some arguments need air more than answers. Morning poured through 90 feet of glass and lit up every fingerprint I'd failed to wipe the day before. The light made fireworks of the tiny smudges, evidence of hands and a life. I brewed coffee. I watered the fiddle-leaf fig my grandmother had insisted I could keep alive, even though she believed all houseplants were a conspiracy to make you feel guilty for being busy. I sent Camille a picture of the view with the caption, "Your bouquet would have loved this light." At 8:12 a.m., Miguel texted, "Quiet night. Package for you at the desk." I went down at 9. Delilah had left a small envelope. Inside, a stamped copy of the acknowledgement form I'd watched her fill in at the hotel. "I acknowledge I am not authorized to enter 1150 Astor PHA without the beneficiary's written consent. Signed, my father." The signature looked like a man trying to hold himself together with a pen. At 9:23 a.m., Lydia called. "They've gone out of town for a few days," she said. "We're sending a casserole and Pastor Kim next week at 10:40 a.m. An email from Rachel. HOA updated access list. Also, your grandmother's amendment has a line we didn't read aloud last night. No contest applies to wills and future distributions. If they push again, they risk more than embarrassment." I typed back, "I know. I chose not to weaponize it." At noon, I opened every window until the apartment exhaled. The city's noise climbed inside politely. A breeze lifted the corner of a photo on the fridge. My grandmother, with one hand on a window latch, eyes laughing. I touched the photo with a finger still faintly stinging from last night and whispered, "I kept it open." That afternoon, I met Camille for tea, because that is how soft rebellions end in families like ours. Sugar, steam, cracked laughter. She took my hand across the little two-top and said, "Thank you," like she was putting a glass dome over something fragile. "I love you," I said. "That's why I brought paper." She sniffed and smiled. "Ethan says your class reading was the hottest thing he's ever seen at a wedding." "Your husband has unusual tastes," I said. We laughed because laughter is what stays when rooms become honest. Consequences arrived like regular mail. My parents did not move in anywhere. They went to see Pastor Kim twice. My mother sent me a text 1 week later.
I will knock next time. Not an apology, a noun. And me? I took a pencil and wrote on the inside of my front door where only someone who loves doors would look. Fear wants fast. Boundaries like slow. Then I did the bravest adult thing I know. I lived in my home without letting anyone turn it into their floor plan.
You want a villain. You want a satisfyingly cinematic revenge. The truth has fewer pyrotechnics and more filings. Revenge was not calling the police into the ballroom and having my parents escorted out while cousins live-streamed. Revenge was not reading aloud the sentence about immediate forfeiture of any contingent interest until everyone realized I could legally torch their inheritance with a signature and an attitude. Revenge was this: taking the night my mother planned as a move-in and turning it into a liturgy of documents and dates. 8.3, 2023-118,947. Deed. Tax paid. HOA current. Notary present. Concierge briefed. Sheriff's non-emergency logged. Letters on file. Authorization list updated. Photos of lock cylinders taken, printed, stapled. I made the problem boring. There is no oxygen in boring. Rumors cannot light in boring. Boring rescues weddings and front doors. Does it make a good story? Apparently. My cousin texted me the next day. Are you going to put this on TikTok? No, I told her. I'm going to put it in a drawer labeled receipts, where stories that try to chew you up go to starve. If you need proof that people can learn, here it is. 2 weeks after the wedding, my father asked to meet me for coffee. He chose a diner whose joy is a laminated menu with photos that make you feel safe. He ordered eggs. He didn't eat them. I signed your paper, he said. You did, I said. I didn't like it. I didn't ask you to like it, I said. I asked you to respect it. He exhaled. When you were born. He stopped because men of his generation always start there and then discover that they already milked that cow for a decade too long. When you were born, he resumed anyway. We kept the bassinet by our bed. You slept with one hand open, like you were asking for a receipt. Babies have good instincts, I said. He rubbed his jaw. Your grandmother always liked you more. My grandmother liked open windows, I said. I remember to open them. He stared at his eggs. It's not easy to be demoted. You're not demoted, I said gently. You're just not my landlord. He laughed, despite himself. The laugh was a stone skipping. Your mother says you're cruel, he said. Your mother said you were lazy when you got laid off, I said. Sometimes mothers are wrong. He nodded like a man trying on a hat in a store with good mirrors. I'll knock next time, he said, and then flinched as if he had said something obscene. Thank you, I said. If you don't hear me answer, call first. If you still don't hear me, leave and come back later. That's what doors are for. He pushed the eggs away. You always did like nouns. I smiled. They're hard to argue with. 2 months later, my mother asked for tea. She chose a hotel lounge that smelled like money and citrus cleaner. She wore white. She always wears white when she plans to be offended. I was Carried away, she said, at the wedding. You slapped me, I said. You were carried toward me. I was afraid, she said, surprising me into looking at her like a human being. Your father and I, we are getting older. Houses feel like boats. You are the only one with an oar. You have your house, I said. It's too far from the grandchildren, she said. A word that she drops like pearls in front of men who like to collect them. You can move, I said. Somewhere that isn't my living room. She made a face, because moving to a smaller house would feel like losing to the prudent people. Your grandmother would have wanted. Grandma wanted me to open windows, I said, and to have the strength to close doors. Silence pooled. She reached into her bag, and I braced for a new document, a new plot. He pulled out a small envelope and slid it across. Inside, a photo. Me, at 6, sleeping beside the window at Grandma's. A little blue bowl on the sill holding 3 barrettes and a Lego. You used to put all your treasures in one place, she said. I thought if I moved into your home, I could be near your bowl. You can be near me, I said, without living in my bowl. Tears gathered in the corners of her eyes and went nowhere because we were in public. I will knock next time, she said in a small voice. I did not know you could say no to your parents. You can, I said, and still love them. People asked for months after the wedding, what was your secret? As if the trick was a magic word. It wasn't. It was preparation. At noon on the day of the wedding, I had stopped by the building with a binder. Rachel calls it the boring binder. I call it my grandmother's ghost. Inside, the trust amendment, the conformed deed, a copy of my driver's license, a printout of the authorization list, photos of the lock cylinders, the letter for locksmiths, the letter for the HOA, a memo to the private security firm that monitors 1150 Astor after midnight, the sheriff's non-emergency number with a note for dispatch. Call if attempted unauthorized entry by family presenting agreement. Miguel had looked at the binder the way men in uniforms look at competence that doesn't need a lecture. This is a lot, he said. It is enough, I said. He nodded. You want me to call you if anyone shows up with cake? Call me if anyone shows up with cake and a key, I said. At 12:02, I met Delilah in the lobby coffee shop across the street. I signed a short statement, acknowledging my rights, authorizing security to treat unauthorized entry as trespass, asking them to call the sheriff if needed, and she notarized it with a stamp that made the paper feel less alone. You would not believe how often I do this for daughters, she said, packing up her stamp. Mothers, sometimes. Sons almost never. Daughters, every week. At 12:15, I texted Rachel a photo of the notarized form, and she sent back a single word. Armor. At 12:30, I called the HOA office. We'll keep the lobby team on alert tonight, the manager said, and I'll email Miguel so he has it in his inbox. At 12:45, I reheated coffee and read 8.3 aloud twice so I would not stumble when the time came. Everything else, the speech, the envelope, the raised hand and the slap, was garnish
on a plan that was boring on purpose.
3 months after the wedding, my parents moved to a town 15 minutes away from Camille. The house is smaller than their old one, and bigger than the courage it took to choose it. My father sends me photos of a lemon tree that won't fruit. My mother sends me photos of Camille's babies, like she invented them. On the day they moved, a text came from my mother that I saved. We left our spare key with Camille. That is where it belongs. I texted back, "Thank you for telling me. If you need to visit, knock." She sent a period. It is sometimes all we have. On the anniversary of my grandmother's death, I visited the cemetery with Camille. We brought a little blue bowl from a thrift store because the original one lives on my entry table. We put 2 barrettes and a Lego in it. We told her the story. "I would have come to the wedding to hear you read 8.3, Camille said, swiping at her eyes. "Grandma would have heckled," I said. "She would have shouted, 'Louder! Dates!'" We laughed, and the wind lifted the edge of the picnic blanket, and somewhere in the city, a doorman put down a phone and stood up, because a woman had walked in with a binder and a noun. I will tell you one last thing so you don't mistake firmness for frost. The day after my father signed the acknowledgement, I put a second acknowledgement in my own binder. I am not authorized to enter their house without their written consent. I signed it in front of Delilah. She stamped it. I mailed them a copy. My mother called, furious. "We would never lock you out." "You did," I said gently, thinking of every time I had been told my feelings were an inconvenience. "Just not with doors." She hung up. 2 days later, she texted a photo of my father holding my signed acknowledgement and grinning like a man who had not expected reciprocity. "We are learning," the caption read. So am I. If you are reading this to find a way to survive your own version of family, here is the only advice I can give with a straight face. Write it down before you have to say it out loud. Practice the nouns until you can use them without shaking. Record the instrument number. Memorize the clause. Put the letters in a binder and give the binder a stupid, affectionate name so you can love it instead of resent it. Tell the people who will answer phones for you what to say into them. Take a photo of your lock cylinders. Give your building permission to protect you. Put a notary in your contacts. Put the sheriff's non-emergency line in your phone. Set reminders for the parts of your life that require stamps. And then, in the moment, be boring. People think revenge is red and loud. The most effective revenge I have ever seen is the clean edge of a date stamp on a page. It feels like nothing. It keeps everything. I still have that faint crescent on my cheek in photos from my sister's wedding. M.A. Cup couldn't quite erase it. When I look at it now, what I remember is not the sting. I remember the weight of paper in my hand and the feeling in the room when 30 people learned that love is not a lease and family is not a set of keys. I remember reading 8.3 in a voice that didn't try to make anyone smaller. I remember the small sound my grandmother's ghost made when she approved. A window sliding open, a house exhaling. And I remember the text from my mother a month later at 8:01 p.m. when I was washing a glass and listening to the city and the dog thumped his tail against the cabinet because he knew the rhythm of the house. "I am at your door. May I come in?" I wiped my hands. I walked to the door. I looked through the peephole for the first time in my life when it was my mother on the other side. She stood there in a white sweater and a face that had learned at last to wait. I opened it. I stood in the doorway with the blue bowl on the table behind me, the evening throwing long light across the floor, the apartment smelling like basil, and something I had sautéed with garlic and contentment. "Yes," I said. "You may come in." She did. She left her shoes by the mat without being told. She did not reach for the keys in the bowl. We sat at my small table and we ate. In the silence that was not punishment, we talked about lemons that won't fruit and grandsons who will, about Camille's new promotion, about the dog's insistence on stealing socks, about the concert series at the park this summer. When she left, she stood in the doorway and touched the frame where I had written my small sentence, and then erased it, because some rules you learn well enough, you don't need to read them anymore. "Thank you for keeping the windows open," she said. "Thank you for knocking," I said. She nodded. Quaz 8. What was it? 8.3, I said. She smiled. Not with approval exactly, but with recognition. The way you recognize a map because you finally learned how. What a read. 3 weeks after the wedding, I went to the county recorder's office on a Wednesday that smelled like paper and rain. The lobby had a bulletin board crowded with flyers: Lost Dog, Neighborhood Watch, Community Tax Prep, and a sign that said, "Be patient with public servants. They are not wizards," which made me love the building before I'd even touched its laminate counter. "Instrument number?" the clerk asked without preamble. She had a purple sweater, a practical haircut, and a nameplate that declared her Delia in sans serif, which made me think of Delilah and her notary stamp. 2023-118-947, I said. Delia's fingers performed a quiet concerto on the keyboard. Tran Family Irrevocable Trust. Amendment filed March 14th, 10:41 a.m., she said. "And you want certified copies?" 2, I said. 1 for my lawyer, 1 for my blue bowl. She didn't laugh, which endeared her to me more. She slid a beige form across the counter, and I filled in lines that declared, "Read my address, my reason, personal records, and the number of copies." I paid $9 per certification and watched as she stamped the pages with a seal that left a raised circle you could feel with your fingers. "Do you want to verify the images?" she asked, and gestured to a monitor where black and white scans sat like ghosts with good posture. I looked. There was my grandmother's looping signature, the date, the stamp. The invisible machinery of the city making a promise on her behalf and mine. There were the words 8.3 underlined twice in the electronic image because Rachel, anticipating me, had underlined them on the original before they scanned it. I pressed my thumb against the glass as if the screen could feel the gratitude I couldn't put anywhere else. "Clerks are underrated," I said. Delia looked at me with surprise that softened into affection. "We're the ones who pin butterflies without killing them," she said. "The butterflies are your documents." Our job is to keep 'em hem still enough that you can show them to people who don't believe in butterflies. Thank you, I said, for keeping mine in one place. She slid the certified copies into a white envelope and stamped the flap. Keep one where you can grab it if your hands are shaking, she advised, and one where you can get it without explaining yourself to anyone. I put the envelope in my tote bag. The rain paused. The city made a sound like a window sliding up and down. I walked back to my car with the relief of a person who has caught something fragile and tucked it in her pocket. The HOA held its annual meeting 2 Thursdays later in the multi-purpose room that wants to be all things to all people and therefore earns no one's love. I went because Rachel has trained me to show up for boring things. She says they are the ribs that keep the heart's rhythm from tearing lungs. Miguel sat near the back in his off-duty clothes, which was disorienting. He raises a hand. I raised mine back, like we were children in the same class. The president called the meeting to order and did the liturgy. Budget, reserves, roof repair timetable, elevator lubrication. Nothing new leaks, he declared, as if this was news worth champagne. And then, security. Miguel stood and cleared his throat. We had an incident last month where someone tried to deliver an agreement and claim authorization to move into a unit, he said. A polite cough of recognition went around the room, because nothing stays secret long at 1150 Astor. We followed procedure. We were prepared, that's all. He sat down. The woman 3 seats over turned to me as if news had just pressed her elbow. That was you? It was my family, I said, which felt like telling the truth and not telling on anyone at the same time. I envy your preparation, she said. My cousin shows up with a suitcase every time she fights with her boyfriend. I told her about the boring binder. She laughed at the name and wrote it on her phone in her notes app. I'm going to make one for my mom, she said, and one for me. Make them pretty so you like them, I said. Choose a tab color you enjoy. It helps. When the meeting ended, Miguel stopped me by the door. Your letters, he said simply. They made my job easy. Your job made my life easy, I said. We shook hands like neighbors who have survived something together that we refused to dramatize. My father's lemon tree would not fruit. Citrus is stubborn like men who've believed for 60 years that brute force should be enough. He texted me a photo with the caption, "What does one do when a tree refuses to perform?" Feed it, I wrote back, because I have a petty streak. He sent a second text. Will you come look? I knocked on their new front door on a Sunday afternoon. Camille's boys had already left smudges at 2 vertical heights, one at 18 inches and one at 32. My mother opened the door with a smile that she loaded quickly into her face, like a hostess loading hors d'oeuvres onto a tray. She did not say family. She did not reach for my elbow. She stood aside and let me enter first. The lemon tree sat in a terracotta pot that had seen better potting soil. Its leaves were waxy in a manner that suggested it was performing a pantomime of health. Do you have a pencil? I asked. My father looked surprised. He brought me one from the junk drawer, the exact kind of pencil you keep for grocery lists and emergencies. I poked my finger into the soil, dry an inch down. I used the pencil to aerate, the way you poke holes in a pie crust. We watered. We moved the pot 3 feet to the left to catch the actual sun instead of the idea of sun. You can't bully a lemon, I said. You can only make sure it has what it needs and wait. He looked at the tree as if it had insulted him politically. I will give it time, he said. Good, I said, and a feeding schedule. We sat at their small table, which still smelled like the lumberyard. My mother put out tea and a plate of brittle cookies that break into dust when you look at them. She loves the aesthetic more than the experience. My father cleared his throat like a man about to crash a plane and asked the passengers to clap for him. I returned the key, he said. We destroyed the copies. Thank you, I said. He slid a small plastic bag across the table. Inside were 3 little metal scraps, teeth of keys that no longer key. Responded to anything. The locksmith suggested this, he said. He said watching your duplicates become not is good for the brain. Destruction can be gracious, I said. My mother's hands were folded in her lap, her knuckles white. Would you like to take a picture in front of the lemon tree? She asked suddenly, as if practicing a new script and not knowing how to exit it gracefully. Next time, I said. She nodded. She did not make a face. It felt like the lemon tree had already taught her more than I thought it could. When I left, my father walked me to the car. He tapped the roof with a flat palm the way people do when they think cars are animals. Maya, he said. Yes? I did not know you could make a room safe with paper. You can, I said. We just don't make television about it. He looked embarrassed, which for him is a blink and an exhale. Thank you for teaching me nouns, he added, and then ruined it slightly by saying, I taught you to ride a bike. You did, I said. And then Grandma taught me to open windows. My mother held a small housewarming. She invited Lydia because she is not a fool and knows the value of a witness with good manners. Camille brought her boys, who found every drawer and every odd object the house was not yet prepared to defend. The lemon tree stood like a green punctuation mark in the corner. You may touch with 2 fingers, my mother told the boys, which in our family is how we say, be gentle, without saying don't. My aunt arrived late with a huff and a plastic bag from a fancy bakery, which was her way of bristling and contributing, without offering herself up as a target. She looked at me, and then at the lemon tree, and then at my mother, and said, Are we behaving? No, I said. We are learning. She made a noise like a tea kettle, then wrapped me in a hug that had more muscle than I expected. You were brave, she said into my hair. I was boring, I said. It's different. That, too, she admitted. We ate 2 sweet cake and 2 salty olives and stood in a chi circle, because chairs are not yet in the numbers needed to support a family. Lydia told a story about a cake delivery that had gone awry at the hotel. Camille showed us a video of Ethan dancing with the boys in the kitchen at midnight when one of them had a nightmare. My mother did not say family. She said we and us and your home with correct possessives, which is a language I can live with. At the end, as I tied a ribbon on a stack of disposable plates because their dishwasher hadn't been installed yet, my mother said, Thank you for coming. And then, after a beat, thank you for not reading the worst sentence. What sentence? The one about disinheritance, she said, and looked away. I read it later. I didn't need it, I said. I had a different sentence. Which? The sheriff's non-emergency number, I said. No one survives that kind of embarrassment. She laughed, not in cruelty, but in recognition. You are your grandmother's granddaughter, she said. I know, I said. The library started a paperwork Saturday with Delilah once a month after the wedding because Lydia, who sits on 3 boards and collects worthy causes the way other women collect shoes, thought it would be useful to offer free notarizations and a short class called Documents That Keep the Peace. She asked me to talk for 10 minutes at the first one. I said yes and wore a navy sweater and jeans because power is a cardigan when you mean it. We met in a room with fluorescent lights and a speckled floor, the kind of room where people vote. 20 women and 2 men came. Delilah sat up at a small table that looked like a folding altar and spread out her stamp, her ledger, and a dish of mints. A whiteboard listed wills, trusts, powers of attorney, authorization letters, emergency contacts, how to talk to your building. Paper can be love, I said. It can also be armor. We went through the list. I told them to keep copies of instrument numbers. I showed them the authorization form I got for my building. Delilah explained the difference between notarization and recording. Miguel, in a cameo, described how to introduce yourself to your building in a way that made people want to help you. Bring cookies, he said, deadpan. Laughter. But also, bring a letter. At the end, a woman with gray hair and a green scarf lingered. My son keeps saying he's moving in temporarily, she said. He is 42. Temporarily is a climate, I said. Give him a date. Put it on paper. Her eyes shone. Do you think he'll sign? He might not, I said, but you will. And then your building will know what to do if he forgets. She nodded. I am tired of not knowing what to do. That's what paper is for, I said, to give your tired a chair. Delilah stamped until her wrist ached. Lydia brought coffee and tiny sandwiches with cucumber. The library put up a sign that said Blue Bowl Clinic on paper Saturdays, because the director liked names that make things feel like they're for humans, because I had told her about my grandmother's bowl. One night in July, the fire alarm went off at 2:13 a.m. Shrill, insistent, the sound of fear wearing a tutu. I pulled on a sweatshirt and shoes, leashed the dog, and joined the migration down the stairs, my neighbors performing a sleepy chorus of questions you should never ask your building because it cannot answer them. What is burning? Is this real? Why now? We gathered on the sidewalk. Miguel stood near the entrance with a flashlight, making slow circles. A woman I'd seen in the elevator once tried to push past him to use the lobby bathroom and then thought better of it, because some men can be polite and inexorable at the same time. Small kitchen fire, Miguel announced when the truck had arrived, and the firefighter with forearms like law gave him the all clear. It's contained. 20 minutes. We stood and shivered and told each other our names like we were on a field trip. When the alarm went silent, people started up the stairs, relief pouring out of bodies like tea out of tilt in mugs. A man I didn't know took advantage of the general movement and drifted toward my door on the 9th floor. I recognized that drift. It was the kind of body language that says, I'm not breaking rules. I'm just following people. Sir, I said, that's not your door. He turned, startled. My friend... Miguel's flashlight pooled gently on the carpet between us. Sir, he said cheerfully, your friend lives on 8. Let's get you there. The man blinked. Logic returned to the room, and he followed Miguel to the elevator.
I unlocked my door. The dog trotted in, pleased that the night had become interesting, and then curled into his bed with a sigh that declared all was once again in its proper place. I put my hand on the blue bowl and thought of Delia's butterflies, and the way some men need a flashlight beam more than a fight.
Cleaning out my grandmother's desk 6 months after the wedding, I found a handwritten note in the shallow drawer where she used to keep stamps. My name on the outside, in her looping, tolerant script. Inside, 3 lines. When you were 6, you learned to open windows. At 16, you learned to close doors. At 26, you will learn to keep both long enough for other people to remember how to breathe. She had dated it the day she called Rachel to schedule the appointment to draft the amendment. I cried into the drawer, which is a better place to cry than a pillow. I cried because she had been writing to a future she wouldn't see, and because she had gotten my ages wrong only by a handful of years, close enough that it felt like she'd been peeking around a corner and waving. I taped the note inside the cabinet door above the sink. When I reached for a cup, I read it. When I returned the cup, I read it again. I drank more water than usual. I put the note in the binder in a plastic sleeve and labeled the tab Grandma, which made me feel like a child and a trustee in the same breath. On a Sunday in late August, we celebrated Camille's birthday at my place because she loves my view, and because the boys think my windows are television. We ate lemon cake because my father's tree had produced exactly 1 fruit, and Camille wanted her birthday to be part science experiment. It tasted mostly like victory, and a little like dirt. We pretended it was wonderful. In a way, it was. The doorbell rang at 6. My mother stood on the other side with a bowl covered in foil and a face that had rehearsed humility. She held up the bowl like an offering at a temple of small domestic gods. "Dumplings," she announced. "They are ugly, but they are ours." "Come in," I said. She stepped in, took off her shoes, and put them neatly beside the mat where my own shoes sit like 2 dogs. She passed the blue bowl without touching it, but she looked at it as if to nod. She took the dumplings to the stove, put them in a pan, and fussed with them until they wanted to be eaten. My father followed a plastic bag and produced from it a singularly proud lemon, which he set on the counter with the reverence of a man placing a trophy on a shelf. We ate. We sang badly. The boys clapped like seals. The dog stole a sock and made a run for it. It felt, in other words, like a family dinner at last. Specific, chaotic, bounded by walls we all respected. After, while Camille stacked plates, and Ethan taught the boys how to rinse without flooding the kitchen, my mother and I sat with mugs of tea. The city stretched itself outside like a cat. "I read your clause," she said, 3 times. I copied the number on a card. I carry it like a talisman. "You don't need to," I said. "You can just knock." "I know," she said, "but the card makes me feel like I have a rule I can follow." "You do," I said. "It's the oldest one. Ask before you take." She smiled and put a hand over mine. "I am proud of you," she said. And then, as if the statement had startled her with its own honesty, she tacked on, "Even if you are difficult." "I am not difficult," I said. "I am clear." She laughed. "It runs in the family," she admitted, and for the first time in months, the word didn't land like a claim. It landed like a fact. We are linked by blood and habit and an ongoing argument with the world about how things should be. When they left, she stood in the doorway again, but this time she did not say thank you or sorry or clause anything. She looked at the little pencil line on the frame where I had once written my sentence and erased it, and she said, "I like it better without the words." "Me too," I said. They went down in the elevator. I watched the numbers light and dim. I washed the cups and wiped the table. I put the lemon my father had brought in the blue bowl so it could be admired for a day, and then pressed into service in tea. Later, I took the binder from the shelf and added 2 new documents to the back under a tab called After. A photo of the lemon on the table, and a printed screenshot of my mother's text. "I will knock next time," with the date and time in the corner. It looked like nothing anyone would care about in court. It looked like everything we had earned. At night, as I got into bed, the city exhaled through my windows, and the dog circled his blanket exactly 3 times because tradition matters. I touched the blue bowl on my way past, the way you touch a mezuzah or a lucky charm. I thought of Delia's butterflies, and Delilah's stamp, and Miguel's flashlight, and Lydia's housekeeping, and Rachel's armor, and my grandmother's note, and my mother's hand landing on my cheek like a bad idea, and the way paper turned it into a story that ended with dumplings and a lemon. When I turned out the light, I said, 8.3, under my breath, the way some people say amen. Not to hurt anyone, to keep the windows open. And in the morning, when the sun found the fingerprints again and made of them fireworks, I smiled and left one there on purpose.